Hi everyone, I am Sarah Michel, and this is another weekly challenge to God, my weekly session where I challenge the so called Almighty to provide any evidence that He exists. Now, as always, I try to make it clear this is not an attack on people's religions, on people's beliefs, but is an experiment that I run every week or so to test if the interventionist God is real, if he in fact exists, and he can prove to me with empirical evidence that he does. So this is not something that I also want to make clear. This is not a pray. This is not a call. This is a demand. If God wants me to believe, the interventionist God wants me to believe in him, he has to prove to me that he exists. I need evidence for that. I need empirical evidence for that. And if he's capable of revealing himself to other people, if he's capable of intervening in the world and provide revelations, so he should be capable of doing this in front of a camera and prove to the entire world that he exists. And that's why I do these videos. And this comes back to the topic that I chose to talk about this week, which is the burden of proof. Do atheists have a burden of proof in their claims that God or gods don't exist? Now, this is important regarding the definition of atheism that I'm using here, because this is something that exists, it's a discussion that exists among atheists. What does being an atheist mean? I am going for let's say, the historical definition of atheism, which is the position that God and gods don't exist. Now, I know that some people nowadays have been using a different definition, that the position of atheism is that we simply lack a belief in God, is what YouTuber Ozymandias calls lack theism. So this is that is not the definition that I'm using. I'm using the definition also by American atheists, that an atheist is simply someone who lacks a belief in a God. I am using the definition, the classical definition, that atheist is the person who believes that there is no God, and this is exactly my claim. I believe that there is no God, and I do these streams as a way to justify why I believe that there is no God. And this comes back anyway to the topic of burden of proof. Do atheists have a burden of proof? Now, the thing is, when we claim that there is no God, of course, we are making a positive claim, and we have to demonstrate why we don't believe that. Now, the thing about burden of proof is that the word proof is often interpreted as evidence, as empirical evidence, to be more precise. But when we're talking about philosophy, it's not necessarily empirical evidence. It can be rational evidence. It can be any sort of justification that is reasonable, and anyone can accept it or not. So it's making a case for your position. It's not necessarily providing, because of course, if we believe that there is no God, we cannot provide any empirical evidence for something that doesn't exist, or that we believe that it doesn't exist. But we still, if we are on a debate, we still have to justify that position rationally. And in the case of theists, it's similar, because if you are a deist, for example, you don't believe that you can provide any empirical evidence that God exists, but you still can make a case for your belief in a God rationally. And this is what deists do. This is what most apologists do. And I believe that you can make a strong case for deism. I think deism can be justified rationally. I made a video about deism. I am not a deist. I still don't believe that there is a God or God. I still believe there is a better rational explanation for it that I'm going to go about in a future video. But I still think there is a case to be made for it. But when you're talking about interventionist God, when you're talking about the gods of polytheism or the Abrahamic monotheism, you are talking about a God that should have some trace evidence that we should be able to detect. And that's why evidence in the claims for those gods, for the interventionist gods, are so important. And that's why when we're talking about evidence for those claims, we are talking about empirical evidence. But in the case of atheism, does atheists have a burden of proof? And Yes, we do. And when we claim that there is no God, we have to rationally justify our position if we are on a debate. And if you are not capable of rationalizing and justifying it to yourself, you, in my opinion, you should really think more about why you are an atheist, because you should be able to do that, especially to yourself. Why have you convinced yourself that there is no God? And in case that you don't believe either way, that you don't have a belief whatsoever, then you are an agnostic. That is the definition of the word agnostic, is not holding any belief in neither claim. That is the classical definition anyway. Either because you think the position is the God is not knowable, or because you think the question is malformed. For whatever reason, you might be an agnostic. And if you are an agnostic, if you are on a debate, you still have to justify your agnosticism. Even though you're not making a positive claim, you are simply saying, I hold no belief whatsoever. If you are in a debate, you have to justify why you hold no belief whatsoever. You still have a burden of proof, because you are making a claim. You are making a claim that you think it's not possible to have any belief in the position that God exists, gods exist or they don't. So it's still something that you should rationally justify. So there is, when we're talking about burden of proof in philosophy, we are talking about justifying a position. Ozzy refers to burden of justification to make it clear, and I think it's a good way to explain it. We are not talking about burden of proof as in a criminal case where you have to prove empirical evidence that a crime was committed or whatever. It is a bit different. And I think one of the reasons why atheists believe that they don't have to justify anything, or they don't just have to justify their position because they simply lack a belief, it's because of the atheist experience. Now, I'm not going to make a criticism to the atheist experience here, because I think the atheist experience format is about people who are theists calling the show and justifying their position. The hosts of the atheist experience cannot justify their position as atheists to every caller, because that would be just such a waste of time. The format of the show is about people who are believers calling them and justifying their position. Now, this is specifically to the show. This is specifically to the atheist experience. But if you are in a debate, with a theist, in a different format, in a different forum, is a different story. You should be able to justify why you are an atheist, and you do have a burden of justification that you have to meet in order to make a good case for your position. Because if you don't, you're going to lose the debate. And yeah, I've seen many debates that atheists have lost. It does happen. You can make as I said, especially if you are debating a deist or someone who is making an argument for deism. There is good arguments for deism that can be made. So this is something important, that every atheist who decides to be open and talk about their atheism in public and try to advocate for it, if you will, we have to know how to make our claims. We have to know how to hold our positions and justify why we are atheists, because we do have a burden of proof or burden of justification when we are debating. So anyway, I'm going to have a look at the chat. Let's see if there are any questions. Thank you all on the chat. Thank you all for dropping by. Let's see if there is any questions, any comments. Yeah, exactly. Nick, just bang on. You have to prove it. You need to justify it. It's just the way the word is used. It's proof in philosophy we can understand as justification, and that is the whole thing. If you are in a debate with someone, you have to justify. That is the point. Like, if you are simply if you're not debating anyone, if you're not being vocal about your atheism, of course you don't have to justify anything. You believe whatever you want. But if you are on the internet, like I am, making a case for atheism, I have to justify it. And if you are having your own channel talking about it, it's the same thing. You are on Twitter debating an apologist or whatever. So anyway, thank you all in the chat. I promised a Q&A video. I am going to do it. I didn't do it because I have a surprise for this Q&A video. It involves my voice. So my voice was terrible until today, pretty much. Today I feel my voice is getting better. I had a terrible cold. So of course, I'll try to make my Q&A video next week. I've also been very busy in the last few days, in the next couple of weeks, actually, with uni, with work, etc. But yeah, I'll try to make it next week. If I can't, I'll have to wait a week after, but I am definitely doing it. If you have questions for me, I have a pinned comment in the comment section of this video and my last two videos. You can comment here on YouTube, or you can comment on Ask FM. I provided the link in the comments. So thank you all. Thank you all for watching. I'm ending the stream now. God hasn't showed up. Another experiment where God didn't fulfill his part of the challenge, and I end the stream again with the conclusion that there is no God. I've been Sarah Michel. Thank you for watching, and I will see you next time. Cheers.